Giving Vampyr a quick recommendation is a bit hard because it's filled with minor flaws and missteps. But at the same time, the game's narrative, world, and characters elevate it to something much greater than the sum of its parts. Vampyr is an action role-playing game from Don't Not, the developers of Life is Strange. The game takes place in 1918 London during the Spanish flu epidemic. You are Jonathan Reed, famous doctor, war veteran, and newly turned vampire. As you adjust to your new form, you're tasked with finding an end to the epidemic while balancing a network of citizens and communities to ensure the world doesn't fall into chaos. Cursed be the choice, as the box reads, and with no quick save feature, you have to trust your instincts as you navigate through the world. Vampyr is built around the character interactions, and thankfully, every interaction is interesting. All the characters are very well voiced, and they have their own little backstory. By talking to them, you can learn more about their personal story and unlock hints. These hints can open up new choices in crucial moments, or just give you interesting side stories and side missions. I honestly love the whole dialogue system, and I made sure to talk to every single character in the game as much as I possibly could. I love how talking to people expands upon the narrative. Even when there is no direct tie-in, there's always something interesting that you can learn about the world. Speaking of the world, it's honestly incredible. I absolutely love the lore of the game, and I found it really well developed, despite a few odd spelling errors in some of the notes and journals. Some elements of the story may feel a bit too out there, but I still loved how deep the lore ran, and I really like how it all came back together in the end, because the ending literally did bring several things full circle, and I thought it ended on a fantastic note. Well, at least for the ending that I got, which was the best ending. Now, before I move on to gameplay, we can't just ignore the main feature of being a vampire: biting people. The game gives you the opportunity to kill pretty much every character in the game, if you want to, and I love how these choices affect the game world. Each choice you make has ramifications that can change the outcome for an individual or the entire community, ranging from small things like gaining a hint to accidentally getting someone killed. And how you act and interact with people in the world really matters too. For example, I ended up accidentally putting myself in a position where I had to kill several different members of the district, but since I gave medicine to heal all the sick people in the district, I was able to stop it from falling into chaos, despite like 4 people being dead. You can also find that killing someone you thought wouldn't matter may still have consequences throughout the game world. They make you choose carefully, and I love that about the game. Overall, fantastic story.
Mary did not deserve her fate. She had already suffered enough during her life, and yet the pain and the suffering went on after her death.
Suffering is part of the immortal condition. Some prefer to lose their minds rather than face the simple truth.
Now, let's talk about the weak link of the game: the combat. It's not that it's bad, it's just very medium. I mean, once you get the hang of the mechanics, it's relatively fun, but something always feels a little off about it. One thing I noticed in particular was that enemies tend to have really annoying tracking mechanics, resulting in several times where it seemed like you shouldn't have gotten hit, but somehow they still hit you. And this definitely led to some frustrating moments, but nothing too bad.
Bro, no way you just did that to me.
Combat was also a bit simple, and once you got into the rhythm, you could kind of spam the same moves. The game does offer some different weapon upgrades and skill trees, however, with the vampire skill tree being the most important. This is where you level up both your special vampire abilities as well as your overall health, stamina, and blood meters with the XP you earned in the game. And you get XP from doing pretty much anything, but you get even more when you kill other characters. Now this creates an interesting dilemma. Should you kill other characters to get more power, or be more caring towards others and be less powerful in combat? I chose the more pacifist route, which resulted in me constantly fighting people above my level. This did make for a few interesting fights, however, and I had to figure out the best ways to fight certain enemies. But by the end of the game, I wasn't exactly thrilled to keep fighting people, so I did not appreciate how many late-game enemies they packed into every corner of the world. But the gameplay isn't all combat, because there are a few other things you can do. One being your vampire vision, which allows you to see blood clearly. This can let you track injured enemies or allies, and it allows you to peek through walls to find close-by characters. There is also this really cool spying mechanic, where a little indicator pops up above the person's head in vampire vision, and it leads you to a vantage point to spy on the person. This can lead to additional hints being unlocked, and frankly, it was always cool as hell to find one of these. You had to be in kind of like the right place at the right time to even get it to work, which I felt made them even cooler to find. So basically, the combat's just kind of but all the narrative-based gameplay is really good.
You told me that already. Yeah, nice shot. You learn quickly. Pointing an empty gun could be a fatal mistake.
Okay, so the music in Vampyr is fantastic, and I think I loved every track on the score. It's a very orchestral heavy score, and the use of some industrial sound effects mixed with dissonant chords made for some great ambience and general eeriness. And I think each different track works really well for their own respective moments in the game, and I particularly loved Lady Ashbury's theme, and the little violin strings that play every time you bite into an enemy. The world is also pretty well designed from a gameplay standpoint, boasting a semi-open world that can be explored relatively freely. But the world really shines from the visual standpoint. It's dark and dreary and it's so interesting to explore. There are some texture issues here and there, but besides that, the game looks great and it's oozing with style. One other detail I think is worth mentioning is that if you kill someone in the game, you may actually be able to find their tombstone in the cemetery, which I think is pretty awesome. All in all though, the music and world of Vampyr are incredible. Now, the biggest negative about the game besides the combat is the general roughness to everything. Character animations are a bit stiff and the faces don't exactly look realistic. There are several instances where characters will repeat the same dialogue over and over as you walk by them, and you will see several assets reused throughout the game world. There are also a few, not many, but a few characters who you can tell are voiced by the same person. And, I mean, obviously there's going to be a handful of bugs and glitches throughout the game, but nothing that was like game-breaking or anything. And there is a fair amount of texture pop-in and random loading screens when traveling between districts. So it's definitely very rough around the edges. But honestly, I was too interested in the world, story, and characters that these issues did little to stop my enthusiasm to keep playing. In the end, Vampyr is certainly not a game for everyone. I mean, if you're looking for some great combat, just go play God of War, because this ain't it. But if you're more interested in talking to a wide cast of interesting characters and diving deep into a vampire-filled, epidemic-ridden 1918 London, then I would highly recommend checking this game out. I think it's definitely greater than the sum of its parts, and it made for easily one of my favorite game experiences this year.